They said I had no future when I left, until the lawyer told me I owned 400 acres. The state gives you two things when you turn 18 and age out of the system: a worn duffel bag for your belongings and a check for $500. They call it a fresh start. It feels more like a final push out the door, the lock clicking shut behind you for good. I stood at the Greyhound station, the diesel fumes thick in the damp morning air, and watched the taillights of the caseworker's car disappear into the city haze. Freedom, I thought, tasted a lot like loneliness. For 6 years, I'd been a file in a cabinet, a name on a list, a problem to be managed. Leo Finch, ward of the state. Now I was just Leo, and Leo had nowhere to go. If this feeling is familiar to you, if you've ever stood on a threshold with everything you owned in one bag, wondering if the world even knew you existed, then stick around. This story is for you. Hit that subscribe button because we're building a community here for people who've had to find their own way home. My way home started with a phone call. I was counting my money for the 10th time, trying to make it look like more than it was, when my cheap burner phone buzzed. Blocked number. I almost ignored it. Probably a wrong number, or worse, someone from the last group home looking for a piece of equipment I'd supposedly lost. But something made me answer. "Leo Finch?" a man's voice asked. It was calm, professional, like the sound of a leather-bound book opening. "Yeah? Who's this?" "My name is Arthur Davies. I'm an attorney in Havenwood, Montana. I'm calling regarding the estate of Elena Finch." The name hit me like a physical blow. Elena Finch, my grandmother, the woman who raised me until I was 12, and then vanished from my life so completely it was as if she'd never been there at all. The official story was that she'd passed away, leaving me with nothing and no one. The story I told myself was that she'd given up on me. It was easier to be angry than to be heartbroken. "I don't know anyone by that name," I lied. The lie felt flimsy, like a sheet of paper in the rain. "Mr. Finch," the lawyer said, his voice patient but firm, "I understand this may be difficult. Your grandmother passed away 6 years ago. I was her attorney, and I am the executor of her will. There are matters that require your signature now that you are of legal age." Estate, will? The words were alien. People like me didn't have estates. We had debts, maybe, a box of hand-me-downs. "Look, if she owed someone money, I don't have it. I have $487 to my name." I could hear him sigh on the other end of the line, a faint, dry rustle. "It's not about debt, son. It's about an inheritance. Your grandmother left you her property. It's located just outside of town here. 400 acres, a farmhouse and a barn." I laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound that turned a few heads at the bus station. 400 acres? Lady, you got the wrong Leo Finch. My grandmother lived in a one-bedroom apartment and worked at a diner. She didn't own a garden plot, let alone a farm. She bought the land with your grandfather before you were born, Leo. It was her home. It's your home now if you want it. But you need to come to Havenwood. There are documents, and there's an offer on the table you need to consider. An offer. The word snagged in my mind. People didn't make offers on things that didn't exist. The silence stretched, filled only by the hiss of a bus's air brakes. I looked at the departures board. Buses to everywhere and nowhere. Los Angeles, Chicago, Denver. None of them felt like a destination. They were just places to run to. Havenwood, Montana wasn't on the board. It was probably a dot on a map, a place you had to find on purpose. "How do I get there?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mr. Davies gave me the directions. A bus to Billings, then another smaller bus that ran twice a day into the valley where Havenwood was nestled. He said he'd meet me at the stop. The entire trip, I felt like I was moving through someone else's dream. The city skyline gave way to sprawling suburbs, then to the vast, empty plains of the Midwest. The bus windows framed a world I'd only seen in pictures: endless skies, rolling hills the color of wheat, and a sense of space so profound it felt like it could swallow you whole. I thought about my grandmother. I tried to conjure a clear image of her face, but it was blurry, softened by time and anger. I remembered her hands, though, strong, a little rough from work, always smelling faintly of cinnamon and yeast from the diner's kitchen. I remembered the way she'd hum while she braided my hair when I was little, a tuneless, comforting sound that made me feel safe. How could the woman with those hands, the woman who lived on tips and wore worn-out cardigans, own 400 acres of anything? It didn't make sense. It felt like a trap. Maybe this was some elaborate scam. Maybe Mr. Davies was a con artist who preyed on kids aging out of the system. It was more believable than the alternative, because if it was true, if she'd had this place all along, what did that say about her? What did it say about me, left to bounce between foster homes while a farm sat empty under the Montana sky? The anger was easier. I held onto it like a shield. It was the only thing that felt real. The second bus was smaller, older, and rattled with every bump in the cracked asphalt. I was the only passenger for the last hour of the journey. The driver, a man with a weathered face and a kind smile, pointed out landmarks that meant nothing to me. "That there's the Crazy Peak," he'd said, gesturing to a jagged mountain in the distance. "Old Crow legend says a spirit lives up there." I just nodded, watching the landscape grow wilder, more remote. The valley opened up before us, a swath of green and gold cradled by dark, pine-covered mountains. It was beautiful in a fierce, intimidating way. Havenwood wasn't so much a town as a single street with a handful of buildings: a general store, a post office, a tavern with a flickering neon sign, and a small brick building with a neat, painted sign that read, "Arthur Davies, Attorney at Law." A man stood waiting by the bus stop, tall and thin, wearing a tweed jacket that looked a little too warm for the afternoon sun. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a head of silver hair. He looked exactly like his voice sounded. "Leo Finch?" he asked, extending a hand. I shook it. His grip was firm. "Mr. Davies. Welcome to Havenwood, son. I imagine you have a lot of questions." That was the understatement of the century. His office was quiet and smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and coffee. It was the kind of place that felt like it had been there forever, a silent witness to the town's secrets. He poured me a cup of coffee, which I took with shaking hands, and sat down behind a large oak desk cluttered with neat stacks of files. He pulled one from the top. My name was on the tab, written in his precise, elegant script. "All right, Leo," he began, leaning forward. "Let's start with the facts. Your grandmother, Elena, purchased this property, which she named Sparrow Creek Ranch, with your grandfather, Michael, in 1985. After he passed, she kept it. When you came to live with her, she was renting an apartment in the city to be closer to better schools for you. The farm was her plan for the future, for your future." I listened, but the words didn't connect. It was like hearing a story about strangers. Why didn't she ever tell me? I can't answer that, Leo. Elena was a very private woman, and her circumstances, they became complicated. He slid a thick folder across the desk. "This is the deed. It's in your name as of your 18th birthday. It's legally yours. However," he paused, and I knew this was where the other shoe would drop. "The property has accrued significant debt, 6 years of unpaid property taxes, to be precise. The total comes to just over $73,000. I choked on my coffee. $73,000? That's impossible. I told you, I have nothing." "I know," he said gently, "which brings us to the offer." He slid another document over. This one was printed on glossy, expensive paper with the logo of a company called Redwood Holdings at the top. Redwood has been trying to acquire the Sparrow Creek property for nearly a decade. It's a prime location for their next big project, a luxury wilderness resort. They've been paying the minimum on the tax lien to keep the county from foreclosing, essentially waiting for the property to fall into their hands. Now that you are the owner, they are legally obligated to make you a formal offer. They are offering to settle the entire tax debt and give you an additional $100,000, clear and free for the deed. My mind spun. $100,000. After everything, after years of nothing, of being worth nothing, here was a number that meant a real apartment, a car, a life. It was a ticket out, a way to finally be free of the past. It was the logical choice, the only choice. Why would she let the taxes get so high, I asked, the question tasting like betrayal. If she had this place, why would she let it go to ruin? Mr. Davies looked at me, his expression unreadable. That's a question I've asked myself many times. Elena was stubborn. She loved that land. She refused every offer Redwood made while she was alive, even when she was struggling financially. After she was gone, the debt just grew. He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet. He returned with a small, dusty cardboard box sealed with yellowed tape. She left this for you as well, her personal effects. She instructed me to give it to you on your 18th birthday, along with the key to the farmhouse. He placed a single, old-fashioned iron key on the desk. It was heavy in my palm. The choice is yours, Leo. You have until the end of the week to accept Redwood's offer. After that, they can petition the court to force a sale to recoup the tax lien. You can take the money and start over, or, well, the alternative is complicated. Or I could be the proud owner of a 400-acre mountain of debt. There was no real choice. I'd take the money. Of course I would. It was the smart thing to do. It was the only thing to do. I'll drive you out to the property, Mr. Davies said, as if sensing the war in my head. You should at least see the place before you sign it away. The drive out of town took 20 minutes. We followed a winding road that traced the path of a rushing creek, the water sparkling in the afternoon light. The air grew cooler, cleaner, smelling of pine and damp earth. We turned onto a gravel driveway marked by a weathered wooden sign. The letters were faded, but I could just make out the words Sparrow Creek. The driveway was overgrown, the branches of untamed lilac bushes scraping against the car, and then we cleared the trees, and I saw it. The farmhouse stood on a gentle rise, overlooking the valley. It was a simple 2-story structure, its white paint peeling, its shutters hanging crooked. A wide porch wrapped around the front, one of its support columns sagging like a tired old man. To the left stood a large red barn, its roofline bowed in the middle. The whole place looked forgotten. It looked like it was holding its breath, waiting for someone to come home. Mr. Davies pulled the car to a stop. "It's not much to look at right now," he said quietly. "Needs a lot of work." I didn't answer. I got out of the car and just stood there, staring. The silence was absolute, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the tall grass and the distant cry of a hawk circling high above. Behind the house, the land rolled away in waves of green and gold, rising up to meet the dark timberline of the mountains. 400 acres. It was an impossible amount of space. I felt a strange pang in my chest, a feeling I couldn't name. It wasn't just land. It was a view. It was a place. I walked up the rickety porch steps, the old iron key feeling cold and heavy in my hand. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a rusty groan, and the door swung inward, opening into darkness and the smell of dust and decay. "I'll leave you to it," Mr. Davies said from behind me. "My number is on my card. Call me when you've made a decision. There's a generator out back if you need power, and the well pump should still work. The pantry might have some old canned goods, but I'd suggest stocking up at the general store in town. He placed the cardboard box of my grandmother's things on the porch railing. Then he got back in his car and drove away, leaving me alone in the overwhelming silence. I stood on the threshold for a long time, the afternoon sun warming my back, the cool, dusty air of the house breathing out at me. This was the place she'd chosen over me, this broken-down house, this wilderness. I needed to see it. I needed to understand why. Stepping inside was like stepping into a photograph. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, and sheets were draped over the furniture, creating ghostly white shapes in the dim light. I pulled a sheet off a sofa, revealing faded floral upholstery. I ran my hand over the armrest, my fingers leaving a clean streak in the dust. I moved through the downstairs rooms, a small living room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with yellowed linoleum floors, a dining room with a heavy wooden table. It was all simple, well-worn, and empty. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum of a life I'd never known. I carried the box of my grandmother's things to the kitchen table and sat down, the legs of the chair scraping against the floor. My hands trembled as I cut the tape with a rusty can opener I found in a drawer. The box wasn't full. On top was a stack of old photographs bound with a rubber band. I slipped it off and shuffled through them. There she was. Younger, her hair dark, her smile wide and unburdened. There was a man with kind eyes and a crooked grin who must have been my grandfather. There were pictures of them building the barn, posing proudly in front of the finished farmhouse. And then there were pictures of me, a baby in her arms on the porch swing, a toddler chasing chickens in the yard, a little boy with a missing front tooth holding up a string of fish from the creek. I didn't remember any of it. My life, my memories, started in that city apartment. It was as if this whole other existence had been erased. Underneath the photos was a small, velvet-lined box containing a silver locket. I opened it. On one side was a tiny photo of my grandmother. On the other, a photo of my mother, a woman I'd never met, who had died when I was an infant. My grandmother had never talked about her. It was a door she always kept closed. At the very bottom of the box, nestled in tissue paper, was another key. This one was different from the house key. It was smaller, more ornate, made of brass, with a heart-shaped head. There was no label, no indication of what it was for. A key to nothing, just like the house. I felt a surge of the old, familiar anger. What was all this? A box of curated memories and a key to a past I couldn't access. It felt like a game, a cruel joke played on the kid who had nothing. I stood up, ready to walk out, to go back to town and sign the papers and take the money. This place wasn't my home, it was a tomb. But as I turned to leave, my eyes caught something. A faint outline on the dusty wall in the living room next to the fireplace. It was a rectangle slightly lighter than the surrounding grime, the shape of a picture frame that had hung there for a long time. On a hunch, I went upstairs. The steps creaked under my weight. There were 2 small bedrooms, both as sterile and sheet-covered as the downstairs. But at the end of the hall was a pull cord hanging from the ceiling. The attic. I pulled the cord, and a set of rickety wooden stairs unfolded. I climbed into the hot, stuffy darkness. The air was thick with the smell of old wood and dried herbs. A single window at the far end let in a sliver of light, illuminating swirling dust motes. And in the center of the room, I saw it, a large cedar chest. It wasn't covered. It looked like it had been waiting. It had a brass lock, a heart-shaped lock. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled the small brass key from my pocket. I knelt in front of the chest, my heart pounding. The key slid into the lock. It fit perfectly. I turned it, and with a soft click, the lock sprang open. I lifted the heavy wooden lid. The chest wasn't filled with treasures or money, it was filled with paper, stacks and stacks of envelopes, all addressed to me in my grandmother's familiar looping handwriting. They were bundled by year, held together with twine. I picked up the first bundle, labeled Year 1. The top letter was dated just a week after I'd been taken into state custody. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open it. "My dearest Leo," it began. The ink was slightly smeared, as if by tears. "If you are reading this, then it means I am gone, and you are a man. It means my plan worked, at least in part. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I know you must hate me. I know you must feel abandoned. Nothing could be further from the truth. The truth is, I was sick, my love. The doctors gave it a fancy name, early onset Alzheimer's, but what it meant was simple. I was losing my mind. My memories were slipping away like sand through my fingers. One day I put the milk in the cupboard. The next, I forgot the way home from the grocery store. I knew a day was coming when I would forget your name, when I might not know who you were. I could not let you see me like that. I could not let you be cared for by a woman who was becoming a ghost." I had to stop reading. A sob tore through me, a raw, ragged sound in the silent attic. I leaned my head against the chest, the rough wood pressing into my forehead, and I cried. I cried for the little boy who thought he'd been thrown away. I cried for the angry teenager who had nursed a grudge like a precious flame. And I cried for her, for the impossible, terrible choice she had to make, abandoning me to save me from herself. It was a sacrifice so profound I couldn't comprehend it. It reshaped the entire foundation of my life, cracking open the bedrock of anger and letting something else seep in. Grief, and a fragile, terrifying flicker of love. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the attic floor. I sat there for hours reading. Letter after letter, she told me the story she could never say out loud. She wrote about the land, how she and my grandfather had poured their life savings and their dreams into it. She wrote about Redwood Holdings and their relentless campaign to buy her out. The CEO was a man my grandfather had once considered a friend, a man who had tried to swindle him out of a business deal years ago. For her, protecting the land from him was a matter of honor. "This land is your legacy, Leo," she wrote in one letter. "It's not about the money, it's about having a place in this world that is yours, a place to stand, a place to come home to. They will try to take it from you. They will offer you money. It will be tempting. I know what it is to have nothing, but I am begging you, if you can, fight for it. It's the only real thing we have." The letters explained the taxes. It was a desperate, brilliant strategy. By letting the taxes pile up, she put the property in a state of legal limbo. The county couldn't foreclose as long as Redwood was paying the interest on the lien, and Redwood couldn't force a sale until the legal owner, me, upon my 18th birthday, was present to either accept their offer or default. She had bought me 6 years of time. She had used the system against itself, sacrificing her own name and reputation, letting the world think she was irresponsible and broke, all to give me a fighting chance. It was a long, slow-motion act of love. I read until the light faded completely, my phone's flashlight casting a weak glow on the pages. My anger was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching sense of loss and a fierce, burning sense of purpose. This wasn't just a property, it was a promise. But how could I keep it? $73,000 might as well have been $73 million. The money from Redwood was the only way out. Taking it felt like spitting on her grave, but refusing it meant losing the farm anyway. It was an impossible choice. I sat there in the dark, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Have you ever been faced with a truth that changes everything? A secret that rewrites your entire past? It's like the ground beneath your feet just disappears. You're left floating with no sense of which way is up. If you've ever felt that, I want you to know you're not alone. So many of us carry stories we don't fully understand, from families who loved us in complicated, messy ways. If this is hitting a nerve for you, let me know in the comments. We read every single one, because understanding these hidden stories is how we start to heal. Now, let's get back to the attic because my grandmother wasn't finished. There was one last letter at the bottom of the first bundle. It was shorter than the others. "My love," it said, "I know this is an impossible burden to place on your shoulders. I have not left you to fight this alone. I saved what I could for as long as I could. It's not much, but it might be enough to hold the wolves at bay for a little while. Your grandfather was a clever man. He always said you should keep your roots deep and safe. Remember that. Where the sun sleeps in winter, that's where he put our foundation." Where the sun sleeps in winter, a riddle. I read the words over and over. It sounded like something from a fantasy novel, not a clue to a hidden stash of cash. I went back downstairs, my mind racing. The house was pitch black now. I fumbled around in the kitchen, found some old candles and a book of matches in a drawer. Soon the small room was filled with a warm, flickering light. I sat at the table, the letter in front of me, the stacks of others piled beside it, like a monument to my grandmother's love. Where the sun sleeps in winter. What did it mean? I thought about the layout of the property. The house faced east, toward the rising sun. The back of the house faced west, but that didn't feel right. It was too simple. I thought about my grandfather, the man I'd only met through photographs. A clever man, a builder. He put our foundation, the foundation of the house. I grabbed a candle and went outside. The night was cold. The sky a dizzying spray of stars, more than I had ever seen in the city. The moon was a bright sliver, casting a pale light over the land. I walked around the house, holding the candle close to the stone foundation. Nothing. It was just a wall of rock and mortar. I went to the barn. The huge doors groaned open. It was cavernous inside, smelling of hay and animals long gone. I searched the foundation there, too. Still nothing. Defeated, I headed back to the house. As I walked past the side of the porch, a glint of metal on the ground caught my eye. It was a pair of heavy, iron-hinged doors, set almost flush with the earth, obscured by overgrown weeds. A root cellar, of course, a place for keeping things safe through the winter, a place deep in the earth. I pulled at the iron rings. The doors were heavy, but they lifted with a great, groaning protest, revealing a set of steep stone steps leading down into the darkness. The air that rose up was cool and smelled of damp earth and potatoes. I took a deep breath and descended, holding my candle high. The cellar was small, the walls lined with empty wooden shelves. It was exactly what you'd expect. I started tapping on the stone walls, listening for a hollow sound. Nothing. I ran my hands over the rough-hewn stones, feeling for anything loose. And then I remembered the last part of the riddle, where the sun sleeps in winter. I stood in the middle of the small room and thought about the sun's path. In the winter, the sun hangs low in the sky. In the northern hemisphere, it sets in the southwest. I turned to the southwest corner of the cellar. The stonework looked the same as the rest, but as I ran my hands over it, one stone low to the ground felt different. It shifted just a fraction of an inch under the pressure of my fingers. My heart hammered against my ribs. I dug my fingers into the cracks around the stone and pulled. It was heavy, but it came free, scraping against its neighbors. Behind it was a dark, square cavity, and inside that cavity was a metal box. It was an old army surplus ammunition can, painted black. It was heavy. I lifted it out and set it on the dirt floor. My hands were shaking again as I worked the latch. I lifted the lid. It was full of cash, bundles of 20s, 50s, and 100s, wrapped in rubber bands. On top of the stacks of money was a simple, handwritten note. For the taxes and for the fight. Make us proud, Leo. Love, G. I sank to my knees on the cold cellar floor, the metal box in my lap, and just stared. I didn't count it right away. I didn't need to. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that it was enough. Enough to pay the debt. Enough to tell Redwood Holdings to go to hell. Enough to keep the promise. The next morning I woke up on the dusty sofa, stiff and sore, but feeling lighter than I had in my entire life. The sun streamed through the dirty windows, and for the first time, I didn't see the dust and decay. I saw the potential. I saw the strong bones of the house. I saw home. I spent the day cleaning. I pulled the sheets off the furniture, beat the dust out of them on the porch railing, and washed the windows until the light poured in. I found a broom and swept away years of neglect. With every stroke, I felt like I was clearing away not just the physical grime, but the emotional baggage I'd been carrying for so long. Late in the afternoon, I counted the money. It came to $75,000, just enough to cover the taxes with a little left over. My grandmother must have been saving it for decades, a little at a time, stashing it away for a future she knew she wouldn't see. It was the ultimate act of faith. Faith in the land, faith in me. The next day, I walked the 5 miles into town. The air was crisp, and the walk felt good, like I was finally moving under my own power in a direction I had chosen. I went to the general store and bought groceries, bread, eggs, coffee, canned stew. The woman behind the counter, a kindly lady with gray hair tied in a bun, gave me a curious look. "You're the Finch boy, aren't you?" she asked. I nodded. "Leo." "I'm Martha. I knew your grandmother. She was a good woman, stubborn as a mule, but good." She smiled. "Glad to see someone's finally out at the old place." It was a small thing, but it meant the world to me. It was the first time someone had looked at me and seen a person connected to a place, to a history, instead of just a kid with a file. After the store, I went to see Mr. Davies. I walked into his office, no longer the lost, angry kid from the bus station. I put the metal box on his desk. "I'm not selling," I said. He looked from the box to my face, and a slow smile spread across his own. "I had a feeling you might say that." We spent the next hour making a plan. He would contact the county tax office first thing in the morning to arrange the payment. Then he would formally notify Redwood Holdings that their offer was rejected. "They won't give up easily, Leo," he warned me. "They'll fight you. They'll try to find loopholes. They have deep pockets." "I know," I said, "but this is my home, and I'm not leaving." He nodded, his eyes full of a respect I'd never seen from an adult before. "Your grandmother would be very proud of you." That night, back at the farmhouse, a storm rolled in. I stood on the porch and watched it come, the sky turning a bruised purple, the wind whipping through the trees. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, pinging against the tin roof. I wasn't afraid. The house groaned and settled around me, its old timbers holding firm against the wind. It had weathered storms before. We both had. The next few weeks were a blur of hard work. I started with the house. I patched the leaky roof, replaced broken window panes, and scrubbed every surface until my hands were raw. I started clearing the overgrown yard, cutting back the wild bushes, and reclaiming the old garden plot. Every day was a challenge. There were moments of overwhelming frustration, like when the well pump broke or when I discovered a family of raccoons living in the chimney. There were nights I'd fall into bed, every muscle aching, wondering if I had made a huge mistake. But then I'd wake up to the sun rising over the valley, and I would read another one of my grandmother's letters, and I would find the strength to keep going. Her words were my guide. She wrote about planting seasons, about how to fix a fence, about the best places in the creek to fish for trout. It was like she was there with me, teaching me how to care for the land she loved. Mr. Davies was true to his word. He handled the legal side of things. Redwood Holdings, as he predicted, did not take the rejection well. They sent a representative out to the farm, a man in a slick suit who looked completely out of place against the backdrop of the mountains. He pulled up in a shiny black SUV, the tires crunching on the gravel I'd just laid down. "Mr. Finch," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "My name is Stephen Cale. I'm with Redwood Holdings. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said, not inviting him onto the porch. "The answer is no." He laughed, a short, condescending bark. "Look, kid, let's be realistic. You're sitting on a gold mine, but you don't have the shovel to dig it up. This place needs hundreds of thousands of dollars in repairs. You're living off canned stew in a falling down shack. We are offering you a life, a real life. We're prepared to increase our offer, $200,000, cash. Think about what you could do with that. $200,000. A year ago, I would have sold my own soul for that kind of money. But things were different now. I wasn't that kid anymore. "The land isn't for sale," I said again, my voice steady. His smile vanished. "You're making a mistake, son. We have ways of getting what we want. This property is a blight on the community. We can petition the county board, cite code violations. We can make your life very, very difficult." "Try it," I said. I looked past him at the mountains standing guard over the valley. My mountains, my land. "I'm not going anywhere." He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head in disgust, got back in his car, and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. The threat hung in the air, but it didn't scare me. It solidified my resolve. This was my fight now. A few days later, a truck pulled up the driveway. It wasn't a black SUV. It was a beat-up Ford, and the man who got out was the bus driver who had driven me into town. He was carrying a toolbox. "Heard you might be needing a hand," he said, tipping his hat. "Name's Bill. I'm a pretty fair carpenter when I'm not driving that old bus." He was the first. Martha from the general store started dropping off hot meals a few times a week. A neighboring rancher, a quiet man named Hank, showed up one afternoon with a tractor and helped me clear a field. People in town, people who remembered my grandmother, started to rally around me. They saw Redwood for what they were, outsiders trying to bully their way in. They saw me as one of their own. I was no longer just Leo Finch, ward of the state. I was Elena's grandson, and I was home. The legal battle with Redwood is still ongoing. Mr. Davies says it will be a long road. They're trying to bury us in paperwork and legal fees, but we're fighting back. Mr. Davies has taken my case on pro bono, and the community has started a small fund to help with the costs. We might not win, I know that. But that's not the point anymore. The point is the fight itself. The point is standing for something. It's been almost a year since I arrived in Havenwood. The farmhouse has a new coat of paint. The porch no longer sags. The garden is producing tomatoes and zucchini, more than I can eat myself. I share them with Martha and Bill and Hank. I've started to repair the old barn, thinking maybe I can get a few chickens, maybe a cow. I'm learning to be a farmer, a caretaker. I still have the chest of letters, but I only read one a week now. I want to make them last. They are my connection to the past and my roadmap for the future. Each one is a gift, a piece of the woman I am only now getting to know. I'm not angry anymore. The hole in my heart that was shaped like abandonment is slowly being filled with understanding, with gratitude, and with a quiet, steady love that transcends time and space. I realized that my inheritance wasn't the 400 acres or the money in the box. It was the choice she gave me, the chance to build a life on a foundation of love and sacrifice. It's a legacy that can't be bought or sold. This place, this Sparrow Creek, it's more than just land. It's my story. It's the story of a woman who fought for her family with every last breath. And it's the story of a lost boy who finally found his way home. What does home mean to you? Is it a place, a person, a feeling? I've learned that sometimes home is a choice you have to fight for. It's the place where you decide to plant your roots, no matter how rocky the soil. If this story has meant something to you, if it's made you think about your own journey home, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to the channel. This is what we do here. We share the real stories, the hard ones, the hopeful ones, and I want to hear yours. Share a story in the comments about a sacrifice someone made for you, or a time you had to fight for what you believed in. Let's fill this space with the kind of stories that remind us that we are all connected and that no one is ever truly alone. Thank you for listening. And from my home to yours, be well.